very good afternoon to you all. It's a pleasure to have Dr. Sidney Strauss with us for our distinguished lecture series. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce him to our team. He is a emeritus full professor of educational psychology at Tel Aviv University since 2008. He has more than 63 years of professional experience. He's a former chief scientist for the Israeli Ministry of Education and was part of several interministerial committees. He was a member of OECD Educational Committee representing Israel in Paris from 2005 to 2008. He is also the chairperson for International Scientific Advisory Committee for World ORT. He taught more than 10 international universities, including MIT and Berkeley. He has published more than 90 papers, written 15 technical papers, and many more. He's a member of 9 professional societies, got more than 23 research and travel grants, and in more than 65 international scientific meetings, and invited 90 colloquia. So his research interest lies in the area of education sciences and teaching, ranging from theory to design and to implementation. Dr. Strauss has been conducting a series of invited guest talks with esteemed academics from around the world. His series comprises of weekly research colloquia, which began in 2020. It's a great privilege that we have you here with us, Professor. And I hand over the session to you, and we are looking forward for this exciting interaction. Thank you so much for accepting.
Well, thank you very much. And so I did a lot of things. That means that I've lived a long life and continue. And I've been active in the years that I've been doing it. And Praveen, nice seeing you.
Sid, can I add something also? So I've known Sid in the past maybe 10 months or so. One of the roles that he's also having is his current role with Amrita University. So you can see that actually in his presentation as well. So my interactions with him have been restricted to that role which he's currently playing, and I thought it will be actually great if Sid can actually join the series of distinguished lecture series as well. And maybe it might be a wishful thinking on my part, and that somehow maybe almost like that we might be alchemized by him. Maybe his touch or his thoughts might be an inspiration for us to charter maybe a new course in research. And while he has this enormous experience and his understanding of, or his ultimate understanding of DNA of teaching, many of you might actually be wondering as well, like how it might be related to what we are doing. And I think there is a lot of commonality and similarity, and maybe the interactions will bring that out. But one of the primary questions which we have been discussing with Professor Sid is also this whole idea of intuition, and also how we can also inspire from this teaching student relationships to also better design machine learning algorithms, right? Most of the things that we know currently from machine learning actually comes from cognitive neurosciences, right? So I think that there are some fundamental questions that we are asking ourselves, and hopefully like these are all would serve definitely as inspiration for us to to solve some fundamental problems. And Sid almost has this hat on, which is like almost like Rick from Casablanca. He's missing his hat now, but we call him also Rick, inspired from Casablanca movie. But yeah, so glad to have you here, almost like a godfather of research, and mentored many people, and I'm sure that you having here can inspire us and rub off, and we can actually come out alchemized. So thank you so much, Sid, and very, very grateful that you could join us today.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I'm sitting in my apartment in southern part of Tel Aviv, a city called Jaffa. And it's lovely outside. The windows are open and there's construction going on. So I'm going to walk over and close the windows. Otherwise, you'll be hearing me and a cacophony of noises from heavy trucks going by. So I apologize for a second time. The first time was my hearing aids, and now I'm going to close this. It has to do with hearing as well. I'll be back in 15 seconds. So here we are. Well, thank you very much, both of you, Adi and Praveen, for your lovely introductions. And as I said, if I've done a lot, it just means that I've been around for a long time and been able to do a lot. And fortunately, or unfortunately, many people, some people my age, don't have those opportunities. But here I am, 81, and still interested and still passionate actually about the work that I'm doing. So I have good genes. My mother passed away at age almost 95, and she had 3 sisters who passed away at age 96, 99, and 99. And the last one who passed away at age 99 sold her car 6 months before she passed away. So I think I got that part at least. They were all very clear thinking. So hopefully today it'll be something clear in what it is that I'll be talking about. So I had one thing prepared, and then Praveen left me a message. And what I'd prepared was in the direction, but not completely, given what it was that he said. So I tried to make some changes in the time that I had between hearing about the change and now. I think one of the things I'm going to do is just simply make the talk shorter than I had originally intended. And then we can have a discussion and a conversation about the sorts of things that Praveen had suggested, what you might want to know. I'm actually not so sure what it is I can say about those things, but I'll tell you what I've understood in the over half century that I've been working in academia, doing scientific work, teaching, etc. So I'm going to be talking today about teaching, speaking about teaching. I'll be talking about teaching. And you might think, well, this is really a strange topic to be interested in. I mean, we know what teaching is. We know when we're being taught, and we know when we're teaching. So where's the problem? And the problem is, at least in the cognitive sciences, there's very, very little knowledge about what teaching is really. Its ontology, what it's made of, and how those parts work together to allow actual teaching to take place. And it is remarkably complex. I've set for myself a task which I'll never be able to complete, but I think it's worth the effort. What I want to do is to make as full as possible a description of what has to be in place in order for teaching to occur. And as I said, it is very complex, very complicated. That's what I'm going to try to do. And it also has practical implications. And I'll mention that a little bit at the end. So here we go. Oh, you should feel completely free to ask questions, interrupt. Those are moments that I really like. So don't think that you have to wait to the end. If you have something which you really disagree with, then, or even kind of disagree with, or you're not sure, then please don't wait to the end, and we can have a conversation in the middle. So in Israel, people who are my age, in order for us to have a conversation, it is said that the conversation has to have at least, you have to speak about at least one ailment, right, at my age. So my back has really been bad for a couple of years now. I walk all hunched over. So we already had half a conversation. I call this an organ recital. When people my age get together and they're talking about their liver and their gallbladder or whatever, so it's an organ recital. And we also have to speak about one grandchild. And if we speak about at least one grandchild, then we've had a conversation if we've also included the ailments that we have. So this is now, he's much older now. This is Yuval, one of my grandchildren. I have 8 grandchildren. This is one of them. Cute little thing, very strong mind, very precise language. He's now at age 5. He just had his 5th birthday. His language is amazing, as is his personality. And here are 2 of his brothers. And here he is frightened, startled, because they were horsing around when they were with him. Now, the one on the right over here, his name is Ori. And when he was age 7 years and 10 months, he said to his mother, my daughter, he said, Mom, I have 3 questions. I don't know how to answer them. She said, okay, so what's up? He said, well, there's only 3. She said, okay, no, I understand. There's 3 questions. He said, but I don't know how to answer them. She said, okay, I understand. You have 3 questions. You don't know how to answer them. So what are your questions? And this is what he said. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? 7 years, 10 months, and these were the questions he was asking himself and wondering about. I told him, my daughter told me that, and I was there the following day when he asked, and so she asked me to talk to him because she didn't know how to answer those questions. And I told him that I thought he was really courageous to ask questions like that. And he should look for courageous answers and not to waffle and not to try and find the easy way out, but to try to come up with deep understandings as best as he can. And that the answers that he will be coming up with to those questions, these are questions that people sometimes avoid. But when they do ask, the answers to the questions change over time. So you shouldn't expect that once he knows whatever the answers are for the moment, if he has answers, that there will be the same answers in another 10, 20, 40 years. But I did ask him, tell me, yesterday, did you do your homework? He said, no. I said, okay, that was you yesterday. And did you beat up your brother? He said, yes. I said, okay, that was you yesterday. And today, did you beat up your brother, your little brother? He said, no. Or he said, not yet. So I said, okay, well, that's who you are today. And every little thing that we do, not the big statements that we make, but every tiny little thing that we do is us. It's a reflection of us. And the accumulation of all those little things that we do are us. So let me tell you why I am here, at least in this meeting that we're having. Then I'm going to try to attempt to understand teaching and tell you how far I've gotten in this project. I'll tell you the answer right away. Not very far. It is just enormous. It's very deep, and extensive. So I'm going to give a very panoramic overview. I'll talk a little bit about research, not too much, hardly any detail. So this is not not going to be your typical presentation. Somebody comes, tells you what the research questions that he had were, his methodology, statistics, blah, blah, you know, all those things. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk about what the enterprise is about, which I think is the most important part of a research. Of course, you do the research, you do the findings, you get your findings, etc. But what is this? What is it that you are trying to understand that's worth trying to understand? You don't want to waste your time on trivial problems. You want to have problems that have enough depth and even a little bit of traction in order to be able to come up with an understanding of the part of the world that captures your imagination. So here's some of the disciplines that touch on the cognition of teaching. And so here we see the brain sciences. So you're sort of there, I think, some of you. Human development, ontogenesis, cultural evolution. These are teaching is in part responsible for cultural evolution. The fact that we teach somebody else something, and if it stays in place, then there's been a change. And if what stays in place spreads across people, then you have cultural change. I'll speak a little bit about that. So it serves a function above and beyond me telling you and you telling others and you telling me. It has to do with us having a history. Human beings have a history because we were able to innovate and to transfer the innovations to others. And we have minds that allow us to understand the history, our history. There's cultural anthropology, non-human teaching, non-human animals teaching, big controversies around what teaching is, looking at them. Cognitive archaeology, what is it from 400,000 years ago and 1.8 million years ago? When we look at archaeological findings, artifacts, what can we understand about how information changed over time? So I'll speak a little bit about that. One of the good things about where I am is that I feel comfortable talking about things I don't know very much about. I've done what I've done. I think about things the way that I think about them. I'm not an expert in all of these fields for sure. Maybe in ontogenesis, even that's in doubt. But the big questions that I'm asking, or the big question I'm asking, which is about the ontology of teaching, these are areas, these are domains that can impinge on my understanding of teaching. I don't have to have expertise in all of the fields, I couldn't, but I have good friends and I can talk with them about their understandings, and with that, they teach me, and then I'm able to understand more about it. What is not inside here is, unfortunately, what you spend no small amount of time on, and that has to do with artificial intelligence, machine learning, machine teaching. That should be in here. And the next time that I give a talk, I'll include it. But for the moment, it's not there. And so for human teaching and for human development, there are four major strands that you can look at. One is the cognitive. All of these are parts of teaching. There's also the emotional part, what happens emotionally between people, the motivational part, and the human interaction part that takes place. I don't know how I can do this. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay. There's a pro-social part having to do with interactions between human beings. I'm talking about human teaching. I'm not talking about non-human animal teaching. I'm not talking about computers teaching each other. I'm talking about human teaching. So it's more restricted than teaching in general. And what it is, we could say about would surely be altered when we think about machine teaching and we think about non-human animal teaching. But I'm restricting myself to what is already a huge ocean, and that's human teaching. So there's empathy and sensitivity as part of what happens when teaching. There are unequal relations in the beginning. The teacher has more power, has more knowledge, and the teacher is obligated professionally not to abuse the power that he or she has. And we all know that there are some teachers who we had when we were pupils who did abuse that power. So it's not as if it is always the case that power is not abused, but it is there and should not be abused. We also have a willingness. This is part of teaching, a willingness to share knowledge, meaning to give and to receive knowledge. And you also have responsibility for others and commitment to others when you're teaching. It's embedded within the teaching. You don't say to yourself, I am now responsible. It's just part of what it is to be a teacher. It also includes respect and friendship, which is not always there. But when good teaching and learning takes place, it is almost always the case that there is both respect and friendship. And in those rare but wonderful moments, it gives you a sense of a spiritual communion with another person. And it's not teaching, what I'm describing here. It's what surrounds the teaching. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about, well, this is what I had in mind until this morning when Praveen made a suggestion about certain things. So I don't know exactly, I'm not going to talk about all of this, but I'll tell you what I would have talked about. And that is, I'm going to be making a claim that teaching is a natural cognitive ability, even more than cognitive ability. And I'm going to base that claim on three kinds of issues, areas. One is children teach. The second is hominins possibly taught, and the universality of teaching. There'll be a little bit about brain-to-brain coupling, probably not heart-to-heart coupling, the emotional connections. Non-professional teachers teach. If you walk around the street, and now after I will have spoken to you for a while, look around, you'll see teaching taking place all over the place. And how do you do this? How do you pick this thing up? Where is this supposed to go? Why are you doing this? And people speak to each other, demonstrate, explain. It is all over the place, and it is happening constantly. And with very few exceptions, probably about 98% of the world's population teaches. And a sliver of those people have actually had teacher training. So that's one of the parts that, one of the kinds of evidence I'm going to give for the claim that teaching is a natural ability. And then there's some educational implications. Okay, so teaching is really one of nature's most remarkable inventions. And it allows us so much. And our cognitive, intellectual, our emotional, motivational, etc., predispositions also allow these things to take place. It is one of nature's inventions. And people, when they talk about it, mostly from the sciences, talk about it as information transfer. And when you think about that, you think about communication and a source and a recipient. But teaching as it takes place is so much more than that. So the scientists have restricted, in some ways, have restricted what it is that we're including within teaching. And I said, mostly it's about information transfer. This is more, it's not a great representation, but teaching is something like this. One mirror looking at another mirror, which is going back to another mirror, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. And it's not just a source and a recipient. There's, as I said, much more, and I'll explain that in a bit. So in Western human teaching, and I have to emphasize it is Western. What I understand is from friends of mine doing work with hunters and gatherers in Africa. What we do in teaching is not very close to what happens in hunting and gathering tribes. But for us, for the Western, there is stage setting. There is, and I'll explain what that is. Then there's information transfer, and then there's evaluation of what has been transferred. But these are not distinct phases. It isn't as if stage setting and then there's no information transfer, and then there's information transfer and there's no evaluation. Everything is mixed up with everything else. On one hand, on the other hand, we can talk about them as separate, as being separate. So let me tell you a little bit about stage setting. There is mutual readings of states, the teacher and the students. They read their emotional states, motivational states, knowledge states, intentionality. All of these are being read before any information is being transferred. I walk into a class, or I'm sitting with a PhD student, or I'm working in the field of lettuce, and I'm teaching people how to cut lettuce in a particular way. Whatever it is that is going on, I'm taking tubers, I'm taking potatoes out of the ground. Somebody's helping me do it. I hadn't done it before, and so they're showing and demonstrating and all of that. Now, you walk into a class, or you're in the field, and you see the people who are there, who are the students, and they're lethargic, look extremely uninterested, bored, thinking about where they'd like to be, just not there. Now, let me ask you, in those situations, are you going to start teaching immediately? Unlikely. So you'll do something, get them moving, get them thinking about things, asking them all kinds of questions about all sorts of topics. And what you're doing is you're trying to get the emotional valence high, or at least above a certain threshold, and get them motivated, etc. And why are we doing this? Because we have an understanding, which I think is correct, but doesn't have to be correct, that there's a connection, a deep connection between motivation and emotions and learning. And these people, let's say there's a teacher who's teaching others, and the teacher is a villager. The villager never took classes about how to motivate, never took classes at any level about the relationship between motivation and learning, things of that nature. None of that. And yet, this is what's happening. Intentionality is particularly interesting because you never really see it. You see the expression of intentionality. You see what somebody wants to do, what they're trying to achieve, and they don't have to tell you. You can see in their actions, in their behaviors. I'll tell you a little bit about that later, but I thought this might be something to show you something about intentionality. So the one who went over the fence thought that the intention of the person who had the stick was to get the stick. He was interested, of course, in the iPhone. And so somebody misread what the intentions were. But the person whose iPhone was lost didn't tell them, I lost my iPhone is over here, I can't get it. Here is, I tried this, I tried that. My intention is to retrieve it. But in the situation, the person read it, or in this case, misread what it was. So how do you do this? How do you read somebody's emotional level, or read their emotions, read their motivations, etc.? Well, one way is through eye contact. Another way is through body language. You can tell what people's feelings are, what their motivations are, by looking at their body language. Remember these days with Trump? And what about the couple on the left and the couple on the right? So you get a sense of what the couples are like. Nobody is saying anything. You can't hear what they're saying, but you already have an understanding about their motivations, their emotional connection, etc. These are inferences that we make, and also facial expressions. And we human beings are very good at reading people's expressions, facial expressions. Sometimes it's difficult if somebody becomes a poker face or doesn't want to show their emotions. Then you have to figure out what their emotions might be, even though the facial expressions don't really give away what those feelings are. But in a situation, you might surmise what somebody is feeling. Okay, so here's some evidence supporting the claim that, number one, that children teach. And this is evidence for the idea that teaching is a natural ability on the part of human beings. Children teach. So teaching is, as I said, really complex. For those of you who have toddlers or have had toddlers at home, your children, you don't teach a 3-year-old how to teach, or a 2-year-old how to teach. You teach them, excuse me, but you don't teach them how to teach. And yet they're able to teach this remarkably complex set of activities. Three-year-olds, 3.5-year-olds mostly demonstrate when they're showing how to do something. 5-year-olds explain. So I'll show you something briefly. Some work that was done a long time ago was we taught children how to play a board game. They never knew how to play it or never saw it before. And we taught them. And then we asked them if they wanted to play with a friend. Well, of course, they wanted to play with a friend. So they called the friend over. The friend didn't know how to play the game. So in order to get the friend to play the game with them, they had to teach them how to play the game. That's what we looked at. What do they do when they teach to get a friend to play? So this game has, if you ever hear a board, it's a board game. So here's a board. There's a path over here. On the inside of the oval are flowers with 4 different colors, flowers that you can affix to the surface and take off of the surface. There is a truck which has a hollow area here. You put a like a die inside, which has red, which matches this. Whoops, sorry. So the red matches this, the orange matches that. So you take the truck, you go around the oval track, you stop in front of, let's say, the orange one. You shake up the truck, the cube rotates around, and if you, let's say that, or here the top is, the color is red, and here is red. If you stop the truck in front of the red one, and then you pulled out the cube and it's a match, you get to take the red flower. If it's not a match, then it's the other person's turn to do that. And the way you win is that the person who gets 4 different color flowers first wins. So now you know why for over 50 years I've been doing research. You get to do really neat things with children. They enjoy doing it. We teach them something, they play with their friends. What could be better? So this is 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds. This is from research from an MA student, got published a number of years ago. These children are age 3. She's setting up the board. She's the teacher. You don't have to worry about them speaking Hebrew because 3-year-olds hardly say anything anyway. They just do it, which says a lot also.
We are unable to see the video. We're still seeing that presentation slide.
So instead of flowers, it's cubes with different colors. There's the truck. She's the teacher. She's not telling the learner anything.
Sid, we are not able to see the video.
How to play the game, how you win the game, nothing. Typical of children at that age.
Sid, can you hear us? Sid?
And she starts the game, but she never said anything to him. It didn't work. What it means is there wasn't a match. She gives it to him. He doesn't know what to do, but he did what she did. Well, it didn't work for him either. She still hasn't explained what to do.
Sid, we can't see the video actually. It's still on the slides.
I'm sorry, what?
We can't see the video because I think your entire computer is not, screen is not shared. Only the slides are shared.
Okay. Okay, well, okay, so let me just tell you then how it works. So this 3-year-old child doesn't tell the learner, the teacher at age 3.5, doesn't tell the learner also around age 3.5, how to play the game, what the rules are, how you win, nothing. She just plays the game, starts playing. And then he tries to figure out over time what it is that she's trying to do. As opposed to that, 5-year-olds will give an explanation like the explanation that I gave. There are different color cubes and a track and blah, blah, all the things that I told you. So in a mere 2 years, you see a big difference between the 3-year-olds and the 5-year-olds as to how to explain to somebody how to play a game, how you organize what it is that you tell the person, things of that nature. Is a very, very big differences between them. Okay, now how do I do this?
I think Vaibhav has shared this on, so don't worry, Sid. He has shared it on the chat window. So we have the YouTube link on the chat window, so we can all see it actually.
Okay, hang on a second though. So how do I get back? Here we are. Okay. Okay. So at age 3.5, children are teaching. They're not Richard Feynman. On the other hand, they know what they're trying to do, which is remarkable if you think about it. That 3.5-year-old already knows that somebody does not know something, and that now I'm going to pass on information. And how do I pass on information? The complexity of that is enormous. So teaching doesn't appear magically at age 3.5, and there's been work by somebody by the name of Lee Swarovski, who's at University of Hamburg. He takes, now listen to this, it's really interesting. He didn't think he was dealing with teaching, but I think he is. He takes children age 1, 1.5, let's say age 1, they do not yet speak. They understand a little bit of language, but they don't speak. And he puts them, the child comes into a room. There's a table in the room. So it's the child and the child's mother or father. And the experimenter. And the experimenter shows all kinds of things on the table in the room. So the experimenter shows objects and talks about them. One is a Rubik's Cube. He puts the Rubik's Cube on the edge of the table. He talks about it, picks it up. Oh, look, it's Rubik's Cube. Look at all the colors. Puts it down on the edge of the table. The Rubik's Cube falls off the table. The infant, age 1, sees it fall. The experimenter pretends that she doesn't know that it falls. And after a little bit, she looks around. She said, "Oh, there was a Rubik's Cube here. Where is it? Where is it?" She pretends she doesn't know. And the infant points to where it is on the floor. And so you can say, well, okay, big deal. It fell down. She didn't know where it is. And she asked where it is, and the infant points. But think about this. There's a knowledge gap, a condition for teaching. There's a knowledge gap. The infant knows where it is, and the experimenter does not know where it is. I mean, does know, but pretends that he doesn't know. So there's a knowledge gap. And what does the infant do? The nonverbal infant, he points to the cube's location. That is for the purpose of reducing the knowledge gap. So infants at age 1 who don't yet speak, understand a little bit of language, can close a knowledge gap where they are knowledgeable and the adult is not knowledgeable. If you think about it that way, that's pretty amazing. It's really quite a feat. And of course, nobody teaches the infant how to do that. So given all of this anecdotal information, it's conceivable that teaching, it's one kind of evidence for teaching being natural for human beings. The fact that young children, infants and toddlers are teaching is one kind of evidence for that. Now, there's another kind of evidence, and that is that hominins probably taught. Hominins were before Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens were somewhere around 200, 250,000 years old. But what was before us, one of the questions that could be asked is, was there any teaching? And how would we ever know? So teaching is not like teeth and bones, which remain, or artifacts like tools, stone tools that people made. Teaching evaporates. The moment I said the word evaporate, it doesn't exist anymore. So how are you going to have any evidence for teaching taking place from 250,000 years and back?
Sid, there's a question for you in the chat window, if it's okay if I read it for you.
Sure.
So the question is, if I understood this question, it's from Achal Agarwal. Do you observe that youngsters are better at teaching their peers than older teachers? That means the peer-to-peer teaching bit, is that like something that, is there a difference that you've observed in the youngsters, and rather than them learning from their older, older, or maybe like, is it, if Achal, if you can actually rephrase that,
basically, I wanted to understand, because I observed in colleges that you have some students who will teach other students, and the students prefer learning from the other students than from a teacher. And I've seen that interaction, the learning is much better than when the teacher gives a lecture and teaches. So I was wondering if there are any studies which show that there is peer-to-peer teaching might be more effective than someone, because maybe some, as you said, stage setting and the emotional and the motivational part of it probably also is easy for a student to capture than an older teacher who might be from a different generation himself. Right?
Yes. In some cases, that is, I think it is correct that student teachers may be better than experts in the subject matter and experts at teaching, because many times somebody who has expertise has routines and ways of thinking about things, and they skip over steps that they took going from one place to another place because it's automatic for them. They don't have to think about it, but it's not automatic for the novice, for the person who is just learning. And people who are recent novices understand that intuitively, and they can go through the steps in ways that are clear for the pupil. There's also the emotional part. When you have two students working together, one's a teacher and one is studying with the other one, the relationship is different. There's not an authority relationship, and it makes life easier, the emotional life and motivational life easier. And that also can help If you had seen, unfortunately, you couldn't see it, but if you had seen the film, the clip that I was showing you, these children were really quite fluent, especially the 5-year-old were very fluent and created a good relationship with the learner, and they knew the subject matter, which was playing the game. So if children know the subject matter, there's a chance that they might be at least as good as a teacher as people who are adults and are trained for that.
Thank you. Yeah, that answers my question.
Okay. So here are.
There is one more
you-
question, Sid.
Yeah.
Sorry,
okay,
sorry to interrupt.
No.
One is, I mean, I had one question as well, but I'll just keep it for later. Jitendra has a question. There is also a recent trend on robots being teachers. And in this, like, there is an absence of, or, lesser emotional connection, if you may, between the student and the teacher. So what are your thoughts around that? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, this is in its infancy, and there's an absence of emotions on the part of the robot, but there's not an absence of emotions on the part of the human learner. In a short amount of time, youngsters develop an emotional relationship with the robot. So so you have to be careful about which part you're talking about the emotional side of things. There's been quite a bit of research now around this. Children at early ages, until about maybe 5, 6, are not 100% clear that the robot is not human, or at least that the robot does not have emotions and motivations. There was some work done at Amrita University in the Machi labs with not even a robot. It was just a piece of cardboard with a face and smiling and moving its mouth, and somebody was speaking almost like a ventriloquist, etc. And the children saw that. It isn't as if they were being duped. And the children, after during recess, came over and asked this robot, the piece of cardboard, if it'd be willing to come home and play with the one who was talking to him, because they wanted to play with him. And they saw it was a piece of cardboard. So we as human beings have a tendency to anthropomorphize, to see human characteristics and traits and intentions and emotions, certainly as youngsters. So, there are emotional relations, but it could be one-sided. Okay, so what I see, was that okay, or do you want me to speak more, or do you have other questions?
yeah, I think from my side, I think that answers it.
Okay. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that there was cumulative culture. These are multiple transitions that take place, transmissions over time. In the case of stone tools, we're talking about somewhere around 1.8 million years. That's sometime a large amount of time. And if you see the pictures here, you with an untrained eye probably don't see too much of a difference between these, but trained people who have looked at stones of this type that are created by human beings see enormous differences between the stones, and not only that, they know if a person who is making a stone is an expert, a stone is called napping, a stone napper, an intermediate level or a novice. And they could tell by the strokes. This is from 1.8 million years ago. They can tell from the strokes whether or not it's a novice, experienced, or expert. And over time, as you see over here, with these stones now started becoming needles and hammers and arrows. They didn't start off that way. So it took close to 2 million years for human beings to pass on these kinds of stone tools and their production. So how does that happen? Somebody makes an innovation. Somebody makes a change in what was until the time. They then transmit it to others, to one or others. And then that other or those others learn. Very simple, but it's very complex. One way of transmitting what it is that the innovation is through teaching. Another way is you can just do it and somebody can watch you, where your intention is not to transmit it, but it ends up being transmitted. Bottom line, teaching seems to be deeply implicated in cumulative culture. And there's a whole area of scholarship and science around around cumulative culture and how it accumulates and the role of teaching in it. Okay, I'm going to be back in a second. Okay, sorry. Okay, apologize. Okay, about a half an hour drive from my apartment in Jaffa is a cave that was discovered just by chance. It's a 400,000-year-old cave. And the people who've been researching in the cave, this is Avi Gofer, is his name, professor just retired from Tel Aviv University. Ella Asaf, she just now got hired to work in the lab. Here they are together in the lab. This is what a lab looks like for that. It's just people sitting next to each other with stones. And then they're analyzing the stones or rocks. Here's the cave. He took me to the cave. You know what? I want to tell you something. Oops, okay. So this is the kind of reasoning that's used to make the claim that it's possible that teaching took place 400,000 years ago. What did they find in the cave? They found that they found tools only in certain places in the cave, not everywhere, just certain places. So that looks like the tool making areas. In the same area, the tools that were being made by non-humans, now hominins, 400,000 years ago, they were the tools, the stone tools were fashioned by experts, experienced and novice tool makers. And as I said, there are ways to determine what the level of expertise is. They even have traces of blood on the stones, and they can know if it's animal, a non-human animal or human animal blood. Somebody's napping, hits his hand, makes a nick, he bleeds. 400,000 years later, there are these traces, and they can tell whether or not it was used for taking off the skin of an animal and there was animal blood, or if it was human blood. At that level, they have it. And that the same tool, the same rock that they were looking at had different levels, skill levels of napping. What might have happened is that well, it looks like here's what they surmised, but there's no way of knowing. You have these stones in the same area. You have different level of expertise, people in the same area. You assume, but it's not 100% sure, at the same time. And then you find tools that had both, let's say, experienced and novice nappers cutting it. So the same tool was worked on by an expert and by a novice. Now, you don't know what happened. Maybe the expert was using it and he discarded it, and then the novice comes by and starts working on it in another place. Could be. It could also be that they were sitting next to each other and the novice was doing something and the expert demonstrated how to do something. There's only circumstantial evidence. And the question is, what is the level of plausibility of the circumstantial evidence? This is in the lab. This is Ella Asaf. These are the stones that were fashioned 400,000 years ago. You have this kind, you have this kind, and I held a couple of them. And I must say that I was just so excited that I'm holding a rock that a hominin 400,000 years ago was holding and was napping it, breaking it off into parts to make tools. Absolutely, for me, super exciting. So the inference is that more advanced nappers might have shown the less advanced nappers how to improve their napping. Well, you don't know. It's an inference. And as I said, so the question as to what is the level of assurance that you have that this took place. Well, the level is not very high, but there's a certain plausibility. So the bottom line for hominin teaching is it's possible that teaching occurred with our ancient ancestors. And now the last part, and that has to do with universality. Is teaching universal? If we're talking about a universal ability on the part of human beings, then, and it has significance for cultural evolution and for passing on information, etc., then we might be talking about something which is significant. So there are modern day hunters and gatherers. Here are modern day hunters and gatherers here. This man is not a giant. This man is probably my size, probably taller because I'm all stooped over, but he's not a huge person. These are pygmy tribe members of a tribe called the Aka. And so here's a Westerner, this fellow over here, with the pygmies. friend of mine, Barry Hewlett, does this kind of work. And what's common to hunter-gatherer bands all across Africa and South America is they share, and they share their resources without preference for age and gender. You don't say women first or children first, women first. There's no preference in the sharing. Everybody gets what they need. It's egalitarian. The people are respected for who they are. There's very little judging, and there's no clear leadership or hierarchy. It's too bad that when Bibi Netanyahu was the prime minister of Israel, that we didn't adopt the hunter-gatherer band ideas and not to have a clear leadership or hierarchy. There's autonomy. People don't tell each other what to do. There's no coercion. Somebody starts to do it, they get sanctioned. They get taught. Children get taught not to coerce. And it's immediate. What you got for picking berries, the gathering part, or a hunt, and you killed animals to eat them. When you've finished what you need, you can inform other hunter-gatherer groups around it. They can come and they can take what it is that you have. So it's possible that teaching is universal. The hunters and gatherers, somewhere around 85%, 90% of human existence, that is from the 250,000 years ago until now, we were hunters and gatherers. It's only recently in our Homo sapiens sapiens history that we are not hunters and gatherers, where we settled, where we have agriculture, domesticated animals, etc. And during that 85 to 90% of human existence, it looks like teaching did take place. You can make a claim possibly for it being universal. So here's the bottom line. If children teach without being taught how to teach, and they do it at remarkably early ages, if our ancient ancestors, at least 400,000 years ago, if they had taught, and if teaching is universal, then we maybe can feel comfortable to make a claim that teaching is a natural ability on the part of human beings. So I didn't show you all the research and all the work that was done into it, but I'm giving you the sort of the high level descriptions of it and what it's the kind of argumentation you use to make a claim such as this about an aspect of human behavior which is so pervasive and so profound. I'm not going to talk about this because I've been talking a lot. Teaching is namaste. So when I came to India for the first time, maybe 6 years ago, I knew the word namaste. I had a few Indian friends at the university. As I learned to say namaste, I had no idea what it meant. And I thought it meant something like, it was a greeting, I thought. But I was told that one understanding of that is that may our souls be as one, the two souls joining. I won't go into this. There became arguments as to how we're born, with what we're born. And there's some people say, there's Western ideas, we're born in original sin, leaving the Garden of Eden. We as human beings have destructive impulses. And the role of society is to rein in those destructive impulses. Freud's told us that. Some say we're born good. Children are not born racist. They're not born to discriminate against people who adhere to a religion other than ours. And what the role of society is just to step off to the side and let the good remain and not to corrupt. And some people say you're born neutral. You're neither good nor bad, evil. You're a product of the reinforcement histories that you've had. You know, Skinner, who had said that. I think we did this already. So this is really too bad. Praveen, do you have a suggestion as to how you can see the movie that the clip that I'm showing or want to show?
I think when you're doing usually when we do the share screen, then rather than sharing only that particular slide, if you can share your whole computer, then actually we can see it. Or if you'd like, if you can share the link with me, I'll be happy to share to the group as well. We can do it either way. Like it can be shared through the chat window or later after this talk.
Okay. So if we do it the first way, then I have to get out of share screen.
Yeah, you'd have to unshare, so stop sharing. And then when you click on the green button, normally it should also give you an option for sharing your entire screen, your entire laptop. Then we can actually see your video as well.
Okay, I just did shop. Okay. Now what do I share?
Now when you click on the green button, share screen.
Okay.
Then it will give you a list of options.
PowerPoint slideshow.
Mm-hmm. So I think you selected that before. Rather than that, if you can share the YouTube window.
You know what? Why don't we do this? When all of this is over, if you want,
Mm-hmm.
I'll send you a couple of the clips, and then anybody, I'll send them to you and to Adi, and anybody who wants to see them is more than welcome, of course, to see them.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So there are so one thing which I had as a question, Sid, is
Sure.
you've talked a lot about teaching, but in the past many years I've been hearing more on learning, and learning being a fundamental and essential element of human beings, and also I think we share that with commonality, probably with other animals as well. So, and learning and teaching is also closely linked. Any thoughts around that? Because I also observe a lot of this with my own kids. And, with my own kids, we have been focused on learning, unlearning, and different elements as well. And I've seen all the things, which you were sharing, I was observing it with my own children as well. So, children generally have this tendency of, so just as an example, my son was interested in Pirates of the Caribbean, the movie. And he started learning about how to play it on piano. So we are in a community, and so he came to me and asked, what's my favorite? I said, well, I love Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack, So then he was very interested, and he said, okay, can you play it for me? So I played it on YouTube, So then they picked it up, and then he went and tried it on piano. And then when his friends started observing that he was playing, so they were also interested, So suddenly the whole community, about 500 or 600 people, all the children are interested in the Pirates of the Caribbean theme, So one thing, so I see that I could actually relate to what you were saying. But I still have this fundamental question, and I mean, I can't help thinking in that angle is both from cognitive sciences and also from machine learning perspective, is that did we get it actually like by focusing too much on learning, did we also miss out on the machine teaching element, And there's been some recent studies also about like, teacher student kind of like learning. So any thoughts around all of this? I don't know, I'm just curious. What is the link between, I thought that, learning precedes teaching, and that is an essential ability right from age 0 onwards, but maybe, I don't have enough expertise to comment on that, so.
Yeah. No, it's very good questions. I have a 3-word answer. I don't know, but I can think about it a little. I think about it, and if first of all, people can learn without being taught, but the intention of teaching is to cause learning in others. That's why we're teaching others, and you could teach as many behaviors and understandings as there are in the human panorama. All of those are and can be taught. Almost everything can be taught. The way that you teach is, I think, a function of your understanding of learning. The purpose of teaching is to cause learning. So how you understand learning will be guiding how it is that you teach. And when novice teachers are studying at college, the university, or teacher training colleges to teach, they already know how to teach. They've been doing it from age 3, even before that. So I don't think we should be teaching people how to teach. What we can do is teach teachers techniques of teaching that are unique to what happens in the culturally designated places where teaching is supposed to take place, and that's in schools. So if you're doing one-on-one teaching, so that's one thing. If you have a classroom, I don't know what the average number of children in a classroom are in India, but it's not one. And in Israel, it's about, I think it's 38. I was in China in a village, and I was told that the school, elementary school that I went to and did research in, that it was typical, and they had 76 children in a classroom in elementary school. It's like crowd control. Yet 2 Israeli children made more noise than 76 Chinese children. I couldn't believe it. In the classroom, there was just, they were focused on what was going on, or at least they pretended to be focused. If it was me and I was pretending to be focused, I'd probably be thinking about when the next recess is and which team is at the top of the table, and this fixture or that fixture. Be thinking about everything except what was actually happening in the classroom. I remember something where I must have been about 7 or 8 years old, and the teacher was droning on about something. And I asked myself if I would be alive in the year 2000. And so I made a calculation. I realized that there's a good chance I'll be alive in the year 2000. In the meantime, the teacher's talking away. maybe she thought I was taking notes. I was just making calculations for say, you know what I'm talking about. And even as adults, when we're in classes at the university, our mind is not 100% all the time on whatever it is that's happening. So there are techniques that we can pass on about teaching in these culturally designated places called schools. But I don't think we have to teach what we know on one-on-one, one person as a teacher and another as a learner in a tutoring situation. The teacher's understanding, I want to go back to this for a second, how you understand or what you understand that learning is going to be a guide for how you teach. You're not going to teach in a way that you think will not lead to learning. So understanding people's intuitions, people are not 99.9% of the world's population, all of whom teach. None of them took courses in machine learning and machine teaching and biochemistry of neurotransmitters and all the things that we teach our students in the cognitive sciences. Yet they know it. I mean, they know from their experience and they know from a way of understanding the world. So the two are inextricable, even in terms of language. Just the word learning and teaching, in many languages, they're almost identical. They're very closely related. So in Hebrew, teach is lilamed and learn is lilmod. The same letters, just a few, the vowels are slightly different. In Russian and in French and in many, many languages, European languages, the two are connected in their etymology, in the actual, the words themselves. I don't know what it's like when in India you have so many languages, but my guess is that it's likely that the two words are related to each other in some of the languages. By the way,
that's very interesting. Yeah, I think even in Hindi, it's the same. If I'm not mistaken, padna and padana, it means like to. I mean, it can actually be interchangeably used to. I think to read and to learn and to teach. So all the three words are linked. So interesting.
You know what, Praveen, I suggest that. I don't think I have to talk more about, with the PowerPoint presentation. I mean, you got the idea. There are other parts that I thought you might have been interested in, but I don't have to talk about those things. So really, the idea is that teaching is natural to human beings, despite its enormous complexity. I think it is natural in the way that spoken language is natural. You don't teach children how to speak a language, the grammar. The grammar is invisible. You don't hear a grammar. What you hear is a word, another word, another word. You hear a string of words, and then there's something which organizes that string of words, which we call grammar. And then there are sentences that obey or disobey the laws of grammar of a particular language. That's you don't hear the grammar though. You just hear the words. You have to infer what the grammar is. It's not in the information that you're getting. Now, how you do that is another story, and there are different theories that have been developed around that. And I think that teaching is similar. You don't see the grammar of teaching, let's say. You see somebody teach, but the decision-making processes that took place while they were teaching are invisible. They're not observable. They're not available to the eye. You have to infer what they were, like you have to infer what the grammar of a language is. So we're talking about something which is inferential, which is deep. It is of enormous significance for human culture, for passing on human culture, for maintaining human culture, and for having a history. You know what? Even though I said you now know I'm a liar. I said I wasn't going to continue, but I do want to show you one thing. I'm a liar like everybody's a liar, right? We all lie. Except, here's the, we all lie, except in science, where we are obligated, ethically obligated, to report accurately as we can what it is that we understand and what our data are. Any data fudging, if that's found out, the person's out on his or her ear immediately. So we're not angels and we are not saints. We do our work in our labs, go home and tell lies to our husbands and to our wives, and little white lies, all different kinds of lies, but not when it comes to our science. Okay, so here's something. So you caught me, or I told you. So something around 225 million children around the world who are not in any school situation whatsoever. There are, when there are schools, many of them are overcrowded. This is not a school assembly. This is a classroom. One teacher. You need binoculars to see the children at the other side there. Now, there used to be a time in Malawi where the average number of children in a classroom was 90. I told you China, where I was, 76, Israel, 38. And as I said, this is crowd control. This is not, it's not education as we know it. But here's in India, right? A different story. This is one of the villages that I visited. But think about this. In the case of Malawi, there's one teacher and there are 90 children, as I said. Why don't we change it? Instead of 1 to 90, why don't we think about those 90 children as teachers? And now you have 90 children and 90 teachers in the classroom. These children know how to teach. We don't have to give them teacher training courses and give them certificates and diplomas and all of that. You can already have them teaching. And then what looked like a tragic situation, despair, one teacher and 90 children, suddenly there's hope. And the children get interested. So the ones who are in the back and are playing cards and doing whatever it is that they're doing, but they're not really, they're not present intellectually, you engage them. And it turns out that when you ask somebody to teach something, they learn the material very well. I mean, all of us know that. Oh, I think I know that, and then suddenly have to explain it to somebody else. And then you see all the holes that you have in your understanding, and you have to now figure out how you're going to explain something that you thought you knew to somebody where you begin to recognize that what you thought you knew, you didn't really know quite well. And so when you teach, you learn a second time, or a third time, or a fourth time. So maybe in some of the work that you do around agriculture, instead of thinking about, so here's a takeaway, which might have nothing to do with anything, but if you are interested in teaching villagers certain kinds of techniques, or to have certain kinds of understandings, you don't, and there are many places where you can go to do this, you don't necessarily have to bring in experts about this. The fact that you have expert teachers, but they don't have the expertise about the subject matter that you're talking about. If you teach a few villagers what it is that you're interested in, they can pass on the information to other villagers. And that would be the case also for children. Children who are not doing well in school or are not in school, you could have other children teaching them. And as somebody had asked, had mentioned, it's possible that they might be better teachers, or at least as good teachers as the adult expert teachers that are in the classroom. This is not to denigrate teachers and their work, for sure not. But it's a way of harnessing this natural ability that human beings have and that children have for the purpose of improving the lot and the knowledge of their colleagues, of their peers. So that's it. There was a lot more, but it was in some ways a very short time to talk about an extremely deep and very heady research, academic, scientific topic, one that has, I think, enormous currency, and certainly from the academic, scientific point of view, intellectual point of view, it is a quite neglected area. Learning, as Praveen said, is people have been studying this for a really long time, certainly in the West. Teaching has been flying below the radar. Some speculation as to why, but doesn't make a difference why. It was below the radar. It is now beginning to emerge. So if there would be a concentrated and concerted effort of teams of people looking at different aspects of teaching and have a mechanism so that they can come together to build a larger picture than the picture that each group has been working on individually, that could be a way to try to have a deeper understanding as to what teaching is, what it's made up of, how it works, what the parts are, how they interact. All of these are part of the large goal. So Praveen, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to talk, as long as you want to talk. Thank you for inviting me. This might not have been what it is that you had in mind when you asked me to talk. You might have been thinking, or others might have expected, research. We did this, we did that. These are the variables. This is what we control, all the things that I've done a million times and you've heard a million times. But I wanted to talk about what I think is the most important part of this enterprise, which is to try to be as clear as possible as to what it is that our questions are, and to be as diverse as possible as to where we can get information to help us understand what it is to get answers to the questions that we're asking. And the last thing, for the young people, for me, everybody's young, but for the really young people, if you can, this is what I've learned over the years, if you can, try not to restrict yourself too much as to what you're, where you're getting ideas from. And if you're working on, I don't know, signal detection around such and such, whatever it is, and you know why you're doing what you're doing, and you know what you're trying to get, and you know why it's important, think about signal detection broadly. Think about how it is that scientists from other domains think about signal detection. And they will come in with different intellectual, conceptual systems, different methodologies, different understandings, and that expands your understanding of signal detection. Whatever it is you're looking at, try and think broad. Try and think as broadly as possible, but not so broadly that you get away from what you're working on. But that, and I'll tell you an anecdote, and with that, I'll end, and I'm happy to talk about anything you want to talk about. I have a very good close friend who's also my cousin. And there were 4 of us as children growing up. And we would all lay in a huge bed and watch something called the Three Stooges. Three Stooges were basically slapstick comedy. We loved it. And I remember my mother coming into the room and saying to us, we watch this on television. And my mother would say, there are 7 Stooges in this room, 3 on television and 4 watching them. You shouldn't be watching this nonsense. It's, oh, Mom, it's this and that. So one of them, I'm the oldest, one of them, a cousin, he got a PhD in pharmacology and then became an MD because he couldn't do research with doctors. The second, her name is Vicky. She is one of 100 full professors at the Harvard Medical School working in immunology. The third is my brother, who didn't go into academia, but is a very, very ethical businessman. So my mother was right about me, but she was wrong about the other 3. So Vicky and I once were, a couple of years, maybe a decade ago, were walking around the Boston area, and she was complaining that she doesn't feel like she has a community and that people are isolated, and she feels isolated, and scientific work, even though people talk about collaboration, it's quite isolated and isolating. And she was upset about that. And she was looking for a community, and she was finding it hard to find a community. And then we talked about her research, and I asked her, so tell me, what are you doing? Because I don't know anything about immunology. Why don't you tell me sort of high level, how do you talk about things? And she said, well, there's, the body has a defense system, and then something comes into the body, attacks the body defends itself chemically, and then in so doing, while it's taking place, the invader changes itself has variance, and then the body has to protect itself, and it has to change itself from the attack, et cetera, et cetera. And I said to her after about maybe 10 minutes, I said, Vicky, you're talking about there's like a war. This is attacking, and this is defending, and this has got a better offense against the defense that you just had. So now you have to change your defense. And I said to her, well, why not? Maybe you could think about this not as war and attacks and defenses. You might think about exactly what you were talking about when we spoke 10 or 15 minutes ago. And that is cooperation and community. And rather than seeing it as war, you can see it as working together with each other and not against each other. And I said, no. And I said, and it's a metaphor. What we're talking about, the war metaphor is a metaphor. I said, and sometimes when there are changes in conceptual systems, the metaphors change. Not sometimes. I think almost always they change. I said, maybe you could start with a different metaphor and then see how that plays out when you're talking about immunology. And she said, no, we don't do that. I do nuts and bolts. I said, oh, that's also a metaphor. What do you mean nuts and bolts? You're not doing nuts and bolts. You're doing the research that you're doing, and you're thinking about it that way. So she wasn't open to that. I sent her an article, which I'm sure she didn't read, about these sorts of things. But why am I telling you that? Because you can think about immunology and the way that you're working in immunology and thinking about it with the ways that you have of thinking about it. But if you move beyond your field a little bit and step back from your field and use the knowledge, harness the knowledge that you have from different areas, you might be able to find a new metaphor or to find a different way of thinking about whatever it is you're talking about that some people are doing in a field that's not even an allied field. So one of the things that's important is to read widely, keep an open mind. That's difficult. And reading widely is difficult because there are only 24 hours in a day. But I found that over time, the accumulated knowledge that I have, looking into areas like cultural evolution, ontogeny, biological evolution, non-human animal teaching, the different areas that impinge on teaching. Each of them allows us to be able to conceptualize what we're looking for and helps us refine and possibly alter the questions that we're asking. That's what I've learned has been helpful for me. The places where I've made strides, where I've made advances, I'm not saying how big they are, but whatever they are, they've been when I've took a couple steps back from what I'm doing and to try to understand it from a wider perspective. It requires the reading and to try to understand, or having discussions with colleagues, in that there's some ideas that are transportable, some ideas that are big ideas that you can use in different areas, ways of thinking about things. If you can grab a hold of some of those transportable ideas, you can then use them for what it is that you're trying to work on, where you take another perspective that you can transport into what you're working on. Well, easy to say, hard to do, not even sure that I told you well what it is that I was talking about. So whatever you, I'll stay here as long as you want. That does not obligate you to stay here. If you want to take off, take off. I think we've probably gone beyond the amount of time that we have. I don't feel that it would be impolite or rude to leave now, after I said I'm willing to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about forever, however much time you want. So if you want to leave, feel totally free.
So Sid, there is just a few comments actually which has come up, and this is related to also what you had shared with respect to Hebrew, French, other European languages, that the whole idea of teaching and learning have similar etymology. So I think we have confirmation from also everyone that in Tamil, Kannada, I said Hindi, Telugu and Malayalam, they have like very similar words. That's minor changes, in between teaching and learning. There are a few questions as well, but we are really out of time. So I don't know if, according to Professor Sid's suggestions, if we could also, I could also frame this and put this to Sid. And get his opinion on that. And I think we were scheduled for 2 o'clock Indian time, but we have stretched past that. But this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Sid, for sharing these ideas. I suggest that we conclude here because this is a very vast topic. And we have actually touched upon various different ideas, and I mean, for me, I feel that it's actually brought a very different perspective. I never actually fundamentally thought teaching as in the same perspective as learning, and that's coming from a father, but now, I've seen also that, I'm able to relate to this much better. My own son coming and teaching me what he has learned, my younger son. I'm definitely able to see that. And also this whole element of, by teaching is when we learn better as well. I think the whole idea of teaching itself makes me understand my own things better, and peer learning and peer teaching is kind of like very, I think at least within this particular group, it's there isn't there definitely is a lot of benefits, and you talked about altruism, and there are some questions around that, but I'll ask you separately on that, Sid. These are wonderful, I think, points to think about in our own cultural evolution and cultural perspectives around teaching. So really wonderful. So I'll hand it over to Adi to maybe conclude.
Can I say, Praveen, just one thing about altruism. I will keep it under 1 minute.
Okay,
I don't think that teaching is altruistic. It depends, of course, on how you define altruism. But if altruism means giving up something of significance for yourself for the benefit of somebody else, and in the West, most of the definitions of altruism have giving up something of value for the benefit of others, meaning you were losing something. In economics, there's two concepts related. It's called rival and non-rival goods. I won't go into it, but teaching is a non-rival good. And what does that mean? It means that I teach somebody, Yeah, I have coffee and a coffee cup, and now I give it to somebody. This is mine. I give it to somebody else. I lent it. I gave it as a present, whatever. The moment I do that, it's not mine. It's the other person's. It's in their hands, not my hands. Ownership is a question around that. When you teach, you don't give up anything. You don't lose your knowledge when you transfer it to somebody else. It remains with you. In that sense, it's not a non-rival good the way that economists talk about it. There's a different quality to it. Love is also like that. You give love to somebody, but now you're not without love. You might even have more love. That's what I thought with my children. How could I have my first child? I love him totally. And now I'm having a second child. How could I love a second child totally? Do I have 2 totals? 3 totals? I have 3 children. Is there conservation of love? And what I found out was that there's no end to it. It's just basically endless. There's more children and more love. And so if altruism is giving up something of value for the benefit, a value to yourself for the benefit of somebody else, then it is not, then teaching is not altruistic. You did give up, if you look at it from a biological point of view, time and resources when you teach. You lose both of those. So I tried to stay within the minute that I promised. So Adi, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Sid. We had a great time right from the beginning of where you started showing showing your grandson, right, and your family. So that was really cute and so emotional. And you also have told us so many things. The first thing about it being that the way how you talk with others, right? You're saying that if you want to start a conversation with your own age, you said we have to have that talk about the ailments first and then talk about your grandson. So it's about the commonality that when you want to have a conversation with others, right? Choose that commonality. That was also very good. And throughout the speech, we have learned so many aspects of teaching, the claims that you have made as a natural ability. I think we should have a session from you on research methodology as well, whenever it's like later, whenever you're available, if that's okay with you.
Sure. If it's something you would want, of course.
Yeah, we can have a short discussion on another session about the same. And thank you so much. In spite of all your busy schedule, you're here with us. So thank you, Sid.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
very
all
much.
the talk. Yeah, we had a great learning from you as well.
Well, if you learn something, then my teaching was okay. I'm happy for that. And now look around you when you're walking in the street anywhere and just see what people are doing when they're together. And I would say almost invariably, you're going to see teaching taking place. It is ubiquitous. It's just somehow escaped our eyes, our imagination, really. It's all over. Like Praveen said, you see, now I was talking about it and you think about your children and then suddenly you see teaching each other effortlessly. They're not struggling at teaching. It's just so easy for us to do. And when you listen and you see what they're doing, you also begin to hear things that your children or grandchildren or anybody in the street has to say about all sorts of things. And it's just colossal, the enormity of what it is that we do effortlessly. Teaching is one of those remarkable inventions of nature, as I said.
Yeah,
So thank-
absolutely true. Yeah. And thank you everyone here. I think I was cutting on their lunchtime. We actually have our lunchtime. I was, yeah. So
Sorry.
thank you all for your patient listening, everyone, whoever is here.
Yeah. I'm sorry I took you away from your meals. Yeah, I do apologize for that. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about what I love and what's important to me, above and beyond people and family and grandchildren and things of that nature. So thank you very much. And Praveen, I hope that the work with Sur and Gayatri around topics like this, where machine learning and machine teaching are coming in, that now you'll see it in a larger picture, what I was trying to talk about today, rather than honing in on one particular area of research. It's enormous, I think.
Yeah, definitely, Sid. Yeah, we've been having like weekly conversations with Sur and Gayatri as well. So I'll actually also update you on that. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Sid. Yeah, you have a good day.
Thank you, Professor.
ahead. Yeah, bye.
Enjoy
Bye,
your
everyone.
meat now.
Bon appetit, everyone. Bye.
Okay.
I've been
Take
Bye.
care. Yeah,
Thank
bye.
you.